those rules. We have rules here, I tell you. If we don't have rules, we won't have thousands of these corrupt officials in jail.
Xi Jinping eliminating the two-term limit on the presidency, with some analysts arguing that this is a sign of the atrophying of the party itself and a sort of, I guess what Keith was saying earlier about a move away from collective leadership.
大家好，我是老吴，欢迎回到李世默先生2021年底的这场深度对谈。在前2集的内容中，我们看到主提问人基斯里奇伯格已经就中共的自我革新、合法性来源以及历史观等问题向李世默发起了连番的尖锐提问。可以说，李世默都给予了非常精彩和有力的回应。不过，精彩的交锋还没有结束。在这一集中，对话进入了问答环节。除了主提问人，我们还会听到另一位主持人以及现场观众提出的问题。这些问题可以说更加直接，也更加不客气，直指西方社会对中国共产党领导模式、权力集中以及习近平任期的一些核心担忧。比如有观点认为，中国现行的制度缺乏真正的规则基础，更像一种人治。习近平主席取消任期限制，是否意味着集体领导的终结和个人权力的无限扩大？中国地方政府在中央集权下是否已经丧失了活力？面对这些来自不同角度、一个比一个更尖锐的考题，李世默又将如何接招？他对中共制度韧性的信心，以及对中国未来面临挑战的判断，能否经得起这轮更密集的火力拷问？接下来就让我们继续关注这场思想的激荡。
Hi, Eric. Our first question is from Frederick Demopoulos. I've subbed your question down a bit, Frederick, sorry. He says, rule-based societies tend to scale more efficiently, whereas relationship power-based societies tend to be more flexible in periods of great social or economic change like China's seen over the past few decades. So first of all, do you accept that premise, I guess, that rules-based societies are more efficient over the long term? If you accept that, do you think that China's willing to move towards a more rules-based system as it sort of enters, I guess, this next stage of its reinvention? And if that is the case, would that change how the CCP has to operate?
Well, I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure how he defines rules-based societies.
Well,
I guess.
Would you characterize China as a rules-based society?
Of course I do. I'm yes, I do. So
you reject the premise that
the
China,
premise. The premise of the question is somehow China is not rule-based, and only America and the West are rules-based. I disagree with that premise. Different countries have different rules and how they work those rules. We have rules here, I tell you. If we don't have rules, we won't have thousands of these corrupt officials in jail. Okay?
Okay. The second question is from Alejandro Reyes. He says, a lot has been made of Xi Jinping eliminating the two-term limit on the presidency, with some analysts arguing that this is a sign of the atrophying of the party itself and a sort of, I guess what Keith was saying earlier about a move away from collective leadership. What are your thoughts on Xi's move, and has there been any pushback within the wider party against that?
I think the Chinese public and the party in particular had been very supportive of this constitutional amendment. And the country felt that, I'm just stating what I see on the ground here, okay? The country, you can disagree with those views, but I feel that most people here think this was the right thing to do given the circumstances and the stage of development of this country and the international environment it faces. And institutionally, it brought the office of the presidency in line with the other powerful offices in the country, which is the party secretary, the general secretaryship of the party and the chairman of the military commission. Both of them did not have term limits.
So are you saying that Xi Jinping doesn't have more concentrated power than any other leader?
No, he does. He does. I'm just saying the country is supportive of that.
But that is a change, right? That is a change
Yes.
away from like the Hu Jintao era. So you said that the circumstances necessitated that change, but what are those specific circumstances?
I've said that the pendulum has swung many times from more centralized power to less centralized, back to more centralized, back to less centralized. So it's nothing new.
No, it's nothing new, but you said there were particular...
This country's institutions have always been evolving. And if they evolve wrong, they'll pay a price. If they evolve right, they'll succeed. All right, and they've been evolving correctly in most cases. I mean, they made mistakes, like the Cultural Revolution was a mistake. The Great Leap Forward was a mistake, and they corrected course.
But I guess what people are interested to know is you said there are particular circumstances now that make the pendulum swing, I guess, necessary.
Yes. Well,
but
let me give you...
What are those circumstances?
Perfect. Oh, good question. Good question. Good questions. Let me give you the circumstances that I think demanded stronger and more centralized leadership in this country. Okay. One, official corruption. Okay. We had a huge corruption problem before the 18th Party Congress, huge, and it was getting worse and worse. And they needed to correct that. And they needed more centralized power to implement the most aggressive, most ferocious anti-corruption campaign known in history, in the entire Chinese 5,000-year history. And they've been succeeding at it, okay? Without centralized power, they would not have been able to do that. Second, they need to have basically move from, like I said, headlong pursuit of economic, market economics and economic growth to a more balanced and more fairly distributed economic system. And you need a centralized power to do that, to redistribute, essentially. Okay. Third, environmental degradation. Okay. You needed stronger central leadership to implement environmental policies and laws. All the localities and regions were competing on economic growth. So they were putting the environment on a back burner. And you needed to organize and have stronger central power to put the environment, which is always long-term, not short, against short-term gains. And you need a stronger leadership at the top.
But is central leadership, centralized leadership, is that the same as like individualized leadership, which is what we're kind of seeing now, which again is a change?
All leaderships are individualized. Leadership is always in persons. They don't exist leaders are not computers. The American leadership is individualized in Joe Biden. Okay, so you can't, computers don't run countries, human beings do.
There's still a difference between a committee and a person, but sorry, I'm diverging from our audience questions. I have one last one for you from Dr. Matthias Bock. He says, China is not just its tier 1 cities, and Matthias has lived in a lot of cities outside of, I guess, like, your main big ones. He says his experience is that unless Beijing defines an action, the kind of local government is basically either paralyzed or robotically executing something, which he thinks is a sort of disadvantage. And you often end up with these situations where people don't want to be the bearer of bad news. So you're not necessarily getting like an accurate picture on the ground relayed up to your central government. Do you agree with that analysis, I guess, but also can the CCP overcome that problem if it is a problem? Yeah,
so I think everything's a matter of degree, okay? You want to achieve a balance that works. You want a situation where local governments and local leaders have the latitude to make decisions on the ground. Yet you don't want to go so extreme that, like I said, the problem with the environment, okay, and the problem with corruption. So you want some stronger centralized leadership to fix some of those problems, to implement the right policies. But of course, you don't want to go so far the other way. The local governments are paralyzed. And I don't think that's happening. There's always risks of that happening. And I'm sure you can find instances of that happening. It's a big country. But I think in general, we're at a place where, the balance is being kept reasonably well. And I think the country will succeed from this point forward.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to you, Keith. That's all the questions we have.
Well, thank you very much, Rebecca. And Eric, can I just follow up on that question a little bit? And I don't want to belabor what happened in Wuhan with the virus, but what Rebecca was just asking about in that question, could that have just been a situation where local officials were afraid to tell people in Beijing, hey, there's a problem here? You know?
Yeah, like I said, this was a virus that was unknown to mankind. It's unprecedented for hundreds of years. We've never seen anything like it. So I don't think you can keep information from someone when you don't even know what that information is. I mean, I think it's unreasonable to say, okay, people in Wuhan on January 5th, they should have known this virus is going to cause the worst pandemic in 500 years. Come on. I mean, even, you know, when everybody knew, months after they shut down Wuhan, millions of people in America did not think this thing was any big deal.
Okay, we're gonna circle back around because I keep trying to say that there were people in Wuhan who were trying to sound the alarm and they were being arrested. That's the point.
People were, of course, people sound alarms, but how could you know? In fact, let me go back to in the early days, some people were calling, thought it was SARS, but it wasn't SARS. Okay, nobody knew anything.
What's a SARS-like zoological virus?
No, it was not SARS at all. Okay, so if it was
SARS-like,
that would, if it was SARS, Donald Trump would have been right. It would have gone away magically. Okay, so the people were sounding alarms, was calling the SARS. Okay, then Donald Trump would have been right.
Well, one of the things you'll never hear me do, Eric, is defend anything Donald Trump ever said. So, but
we agree.
Let's get back. One thing we can agree on, but let me get back to the party. Let me ask you just a broader question. What do you think are the main challenges or the main dangers for the party, both inside of China and in its foreign relations, coming up over the next 5 years to a decade? What should they be looking out for?
Yeah, like I said, I think in China, domestically, the big risks and the challenges are when they pursue a more equitable society, which is, I think, the top of the agenda for the party political platform. Okay, this is the reinvention that's taking place. We're swinging from economic growth at all costs to more equitable society, common prosperity. In that process, the risk is they don't get the balance right. Okay, we need to have a balance that we need to redistribute and move more benefits to common people and bring the entire society up. But at the same time, if we misdirect that, if they misdirect that initiative, they destroy entrepreneurial initiatives, which is what made this country so successful for so long. That would hurt the economy, and that will come back and hurt the party and the country. Okay, so to get that balance right is no easy task. But if they don't do it, we're going to be in trouble too, because the wealth gap is widening. So they have to do it, and they have to take the risk. And I wish them well.
How about on the foreign relations side? Biggest dangers, biggest challenges.
You know that better than I do. We read that every day in papers, on TV. I mean, obviously the biggest challenge, unfortunately, is to manage relations with the US, which is used to running the entire world and telling everyone how to run their countries, and is finding it very difficult. Somehow another country could potentially even surpass it. And that's a difficult situation to manage. And I think China needs finesse. It needs to stand its ground, because obviously, China should not be contained and won't allow itself to be contained. 1.4 billion people cannot be contained. Their aspirations for better life, for a stronger country cannot be contained. But at the same time, they need finesse.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think these wolf warrior diplomats who are adopting Donald Trump's trash mouth tactics on Twitter and insults and all that, do you think that's benefiting China, or do you think they need to dial it back?
I think the wolf warrior thing was a made up thing. I think the world is just not used to a China that could talk back, right? And you better get used to it. And it's not wolf warrior. They're just being normal. They're being frustrated. They're seeing their country being portrayed wrongly, being demonized. by Western politicians and media, and they're reacting to it. For the first time in many decades, they kept their mouths shut, and now they're saying, wait a minute, we can't allow this to go on, and we're going to be normal, like every other country, to express our views openly.
For the record, wolf warrior was a term that came out of China, not out of the West. They called themselves wolf warrior.
No, it was a movie that had nothing to do with
a Chinese movie.
It was Chinese. It would be like me calling American diplomats Rambo diplomats, you know, but we don't do that, okay? It was a label that being placed on people who have changed their behavior from the past. But the label was put on them by Western media and Western politicians.
I guarantee you no Westerner I know has ever seen Wolf Warrior or any of the Wolf Warrior movies and wouldn't know what it is, except Rebecca. She's seen it.
Oh, yes, they do. Well, they've never seen the movie. That's another problem. They've never seen the movie, but they do know where the label comes from. I mean, it's being often referred to in the New York Times and CNN. It says the Chinese Rambo-like movie. You know, but they haven't seen the movie. I agree.
好，李世默与多方问答的这部分精彩内容我们就看到这里。在这一集的问答环节中，我们听到了更多元也更直接的质疑声音。无论是主持人还是现场观众，他们提出的问题都触及了西方社会对中国政治体制的一些深层次的疑虑。面对诸如中国是否规则为本、习近平集权与集体领导的关系、地方政府的能动性以及战狼外交的成因等一系列尖锐问题，李世默再一次展现了他一贯的从容和清晰的逻辑。他强调中国制度的演进有其自身的钟摆效应和现实需求，并非简单的集权或者分权。他也承认中国在发展过程中面临着国内外的巨大挑战，但他对中共应对这些挑战的能力抱有信心。而对于备受诟病的战狼外交，他认为这是西方对中国正常表达立场的一种误读和标签化。可以说，通过这几轮激烈的问答，李世默更进一步地阐释了他对中共道路和中国治理模式的理解与辩护。无论我们是否完全同意他的所有观点，这种直面质疑、勇于辩论的态度，以及他所提供的独特视角，都为我们观察和理解当今复杂的中国提供了一面重要的镜子。而提问方的尖锐和直接，也恰恰使得这场对话更具有含金量，让我们看到了不同观念碰撞时所产生的思想火花。今天的分享就到这里，关于李世默这场精彩的访谈，我们就全部分享完了。感谢大家的收看，我们下次再见。